Hi everybody, and welcome to Cooking with KCI. Today we have a very special guest with us going to show us how to cook a kid-friendly meal. This is Chef Micah.
Howdy.
Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. So we're going to be doing Parmesan crusted chicken tenders, really easy mac and cheese, and then we're going to be doing home-style French fries. So I'm going to kind of walk you through how to do everything. It's going to be really fun, real easy, hopefully. So what I've got here, of course, you need your chicken breast first. Got gloves on. Going to be sanitary with this. Make sure you wash your hands too. That's the first thing you're supposed to do every time. So anyways, I've got my chicken here and I've got it on a cutting board. And a nice little trick here is underneath the cutting board, I have a piece of paper towel that I've wet. And that's to kind of keep it from moving back and forth and keeps it nice and place and snug. So I've got my knife here and I'm going to hold it with my index finger right here and my thumb right there. And then I'm just going to be cutting these into small kind of bite-sized pieces. You want to make sure that you keep your fingers tucked back, almost like a claw. So that way you don't run the risk of anything bad happening. I'm just going to keep cutting these up into small bite-sized pieces. And of course you can do them however you want to. I'm going to make these a little bit smaller today. That way they're almost like a mini chicken tender. And that way they'll cook a little bit quicker too. And after I get these, I'm going to go ahead and set these off to the side. Just going to leave these in here for now. I'm going to cut up maybe one more chicken breast, make it 3. And again, I'm just going small pieces. And of course, if you want to trim off some of the fat, you're more than welcome to do that. It's not really going to make too big of a difference. So I've got this all over here, and the next thing I'm going to do, salt. Get pretty generous with this. So I'll salt the whole thing. I'm going to take my pepper. You don't want to be strong on the pepper, but you still want to kind of be pretty generous with it. And I'm just going to kind of toss it just like this. I want to try to evenly coat it in the salt and pepper I put in there. If you need to, you can add more, but you don't want to overdo it because salt's going to dry out your chicken anyways. Okay, so I kind of got that evenly coated. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to making my batter. So the first thing we need is I'm going to have 1 cup of flour here. I'm going to put that in a bowl. Set that off to the side. And so now I'm going to put my eggs in the bowl. I've got 2 of them. And a quick little trick, if you get any eggshells in there, take the actual eggshell itself and you can scoop it out. It's going to work a lot better than using your fingers. I'm just going to get these 2 in here. And now I'm going to need to whisk. I'm going to break up that yolk right there. And then I'm just going to start whisking it to where almost like I'm getting ready to scramble an egg. So I've got that nice and scrambled up. I'm going to set that to the side. And now the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to make our breadcrumb mix. So what I've got here is I've got about a cup of panko breadcrumbs, which you can use more if need be. I've got about a cup and a half a cup of Parmesan cheese. And then I've got about 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt here, which you're probably gonna, it's gonna vary depending on how much you're making, but this is a good kind of starting point. And you can add more as needed as you're going. So I went ahead and I've washed off my fork from the eggs, and now I'm just gonna incorporate my cheese, breadcrumbs, and salt together. And you want to kind of press down on it because that Parmesan cheese, if you buy the pre-packaged stuff, it's going to clump up a little bit. So you want to make sure it's nice and evenly incorporated. So you see I'm just kind of pressing down with it, and then I'm just kind of mixing it together. It's incorporated. I've got my pan here, and I'm going to spray it with non-stick cooking spray. Nice even coat on there. Set that to the side here. And then the other thing you need to do is set your oven to 375, and then now we can start coating the chicken. And this is a little messy, but it's the fun part. So your first step is going to be called dredging, which is what you're going to put in your flour. Let me get this station set up here. Okay. So I'm going to take one piece and I'm going to dip it in my flour and just kind of nice and evenly coat it. So that's about how it should look after you've coated it in your flour. You don't want it to be too much, but you want almost every piece of that to be white. And then you're going to put it in your egg. You want to get it nice and covered. And then it's going to go in your breadcrumbs. And you're just going to press it down on there. Make sure you press it. That way it gets on there and sticks to it. So you're going to have something that looks just like this. And that's all there is to it. Just keep repeating that until you finish all of it. And we're going to go and get these on the pan, and then we'll pop them in the oven. Okay, so now I've got my chicken tenders on the pan here. As you can see, I've kind of got them spaced out. You don't want them on top of each other. You want to make sure they have nice and even room to cook. So what we're going to do is we've got our oven on 375, and we're going to pop these bad boys in there about 30 minutes. So about 12 to 15 minutes in, we're going to try to check on these and flip them over. So halfway through, make sure you flip them. That's going to make sure you get nice and even cooking and tenderness, and plus they're going to be golden brown and look beautiful. So we're going to put these in here, and we're going to move on to our French fries next. Start on our potatoes. We're going to need our knife again, and make sure you wash your potatoes in cold water beforehand. Don't use hot, use cold. So I'm going to cut the ends of each one off, and then I'm going to cut the potato in half, and then I'm just going to start making my fries. So you can make these as thin as you want to. I've kind of made almost like a tater wedge kind of thing here, but we're gonna probably do something else. Basically just cut them in any shape you want, but you want to make sure that you keep the sizes pretty even, because you want to make sure all of your potatoes cook at the same time, and that way they don't come out of the oven, and then some of them are cooked and some aren't, and then some are hard, some are too soft. So basically just keep on making your potatoes, and we're going to set those to the side in a bowl. 30-35 minutes, and our chicken tenders are now out of the oven. They've kind of got to a nice golden brown right here. And if you have a thermometer, the temperature you want to have this is all poultry, turkey, chicken, whatever, quail for some reason if you're making quail, you want to have 165 on the inside of it. So if you don't, of course, you can take the thickest part of the chicken, cut it open. See, it's going to be completely white. That's good. So now we've got all of our potatoes cut up. You can see they're close to being the same size, but they look like potatoes. So again, you can cut them up however you want to. Here, we've got a ton, but the recipe I'm going to tell you is if you're working with about a pound of Yukon Gold potatoes. So we're going to take paprika, garlic powder, salt, and pepper, and olive oil. So the first thing you're going to do is you want to eyeball this. You can use about a tablespoon if you don't want to use too much, but I'm just going to put enough in here to coat these. I've got a lot of potatoes. So I've got the olive oil in there. Go ahead and start mixing these together. So while I'm doing that, you want to make sure that everything looks kind of glossy. That's how you're going to know it's nice and covered. You need to have the oven set to 400 degrees, and you probably need about just one nice baking tray, about like this. We're not going to worry about spraying it because the olive oil that's in the fries is going to help them with the sticking part, and also going to help crisp them up. So now I've got everything nice and incorporated, and I'm going to add in, and remember this is just if you have a pound of potatoes you're working with here. I've got about a tablespoon garlic powder. Evenly distribute that. Half a teaspoon or tablespoon of smoked paprika. I've got 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. And then I'm just gonna mix that up real good. Making a mess there. And you want to make sure everything is nice and coated. Of course, I'm going to go and add more, and you can add more too, depending on how flavorful you want these. Just the one thing you want to do is be careful with that black pepper and smoked paprika, because paprika, of course, is also pepper. So it's going to be pretty potent. So I'm going to add in more garlic powder here for what I've got. Okay. And then smoked paprika, more of that. And again, you don't have to follow a recipe. A recipe is just a guideline. So you want to make sure you got all the stuff. Just everybody's got different taste buds. Okay, I think that's good. All right, so now I've evenly distributed all my spices and my olive oil. I've got my tray here. So we're just gonna go ahead and start putting these down here on the tray. You want to make sure these are evenly distributed, okay? So you want to kind of spread them out. And of course, we're going to have our oven at 400 degrees, and these are going to take a little bit. We're looking at probably 30, 40 minutes, about the same as the chicken. So you want to make sure you kind of get these ready at the same time as the chicken and pop them both in. So make sure to do your prep first before you do anything else, and you'll be solid. That's good. All right, so we've made our chicken and we've got our fries in the oven. The next thing we're gonna make is mac and cheese, and this one's really easy. So you're just gonna need 7 ingredients. You need 1 box of elbow macaroni. You're gonna need about a pound of the cheese here. You can use Velveeta, any kind of off-brand. And then got 1 pint of half and half. Got 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and then 1 teaspoon of ground mustard, and then 2 whole sticks of butter. So basically the first thing we're gonna do is you wanna get a pot that's gonna be big enough for your whole box of elbow macaroni, and we're gonna salt the water after we fill it up. Might need to get more salt. So I'm just gonna go ahead and really salt this water. Don't be afraid to be generous with it, because it needs to be pretty salty. It's gonna help it cook evenly. And then one thing I like to do, and this works better when you have long noodles that you have to worry about sticking together. You probably don't need to do it for this, but I add a little bit of olive oil to my water, and that prevents the noodles from sticking together. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the stove, and we wanna bring this to a boil. And while we're doing that, we'll prep all the other stuff. All right, so while we're waiting on our water to come to a boil, which I recommend setting that on about a medium high or high, just make sure you keep an eye on it. We're gonna go ahead and prep everything we need for our cheese sauce here. So I've got 2 sticks of butter. And what I'm gonna do is, just so it'll melt a little bit easier, which this is room temperature right now, but I'm gonna cut it into chunks so it'll melt a little bit better. And I ain't gotta worry about one big old stick of butter in there melting. So I've got my chunks of butter here. I'm gonna set that off to the side, and then I'm going to try to cube up this Velveeta here. And again, this is just to make sure that it melts a little bit easier and it's quicker, and we don't have to worry about anything burning or unevenly cooking. So just kind of small cubes about that size. That should be fine. And then while I'm doing that, I want to go ahead and have my stove on a low heat. And I'm gonna take a pot about this size, and this is where we're gonna make our cheese sauce in. I think that's okay. So now we're gonna make our cheese sauce. We've got our water over here almost to a boil, so I've got my 2 sticks of butter. I'm gonna go ahead and put those down in my pot here. And you wanna kind of distribute that evenly. You want this to start to melt, so if it starts to brown, your heat's up too high, you wanna make sure your butter stays a nice kind of yellow consistency while it's melting. It's not melting too fast. So while that's melting, we're gonna go ahead and add in our 2 teaspoons of salt here, our 1 teaspoon of pepper, and then our 1 teaspoon of our ground mustard. And while that's melting, we're just gonna keep whisking this so we can combine all of it. And after this melts, we're gonna add in our whole pint of half and half and incorporate that all nicely together. Okay, so I've got my butter all the way melted. I've got everything whisked together. So it's gonna look kind of just like this consistency right here. It's gonna be a little bit darker because of the pepper and everything. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, make sure you shake this good. I'm gonna add my whole pint of half an apple. Got a little mess there. Okay, now that's in there. I'm gonna keep continuing to whisk to make sure, let's get this cleaned up. Okay. So just keep constantly whisking this. You want to combine it. I'm gonna turn my heat up just a little bit. So once we get this combined and we bring it to a slight little, you should start to see bubbles. And then we're gonna add in our mac and cheese, or sorry, our cheese soon. And we're gonna melt that and combine it, and then our cheese sauce is gonna be done. We just have to wait on our pasta. So we've got our water to a rolling boil now, and this is what it should look like. You're gonna start to see, you know, the pop and everything else. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add in my whole package of macaroni. You stir that up a little bit, and you wanna follow how long it says on your box. It's going to vary depending on, you know, the brand or whatever you buy. This one in particular is 9 minutes. So we're going to let that cook for about 9-10 minutes. Just leave it be. And then next we're going to add in our cheese to our cheese sauce. So you want to do this just a little bit at a time. You don't want to overcrowd it, because once you start to add too much stuff to a pan, it brings down the temperature. So it's not going to cook as evenly. So I've got those in there, and I'm wanting to wait until they start to melt before I start adding whole bunch. Let's go ahead and turn the heat up a little bit. That way it'll help out. And then you want to just keep whisking it as it's melting, because you want to make sure you combine it and it's going to thicken up. So now my cheese sauce is done. I've got everything melted. Should be about this consistency. And I've got my macaroni done. So now what we're going to do is you're going to take a spatula or a slotted spoon, or, you know, whatever. You're just going to go ahead and add your cheese to your macaroni. And then you're just going to toss it. And really, it's good. If you want it to be a little bit thicker, you can add more cheese. If you want, you can also bring it to a boil and then let it simmer. Just, you got to be real careful so you don't burn your cheese. If you do that, make sure you're constantly stirring it. That way it doesn't stick to the bottom. And that's your mac and cheese. Alright guys, so we've got our Parmesan encrusted chicken tenders, we've got our mac and cheese here, and we've got our homemade French fries. And that is the meal. So super simple, just follow all the steps. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments below, and then I'll try to find them and answer them the best I can.